Now I just needed Dan to come in and actually like lay on the bed and just stare at us.
That's Becky. You are like always on tap for the
Right on
opening
time.
line. Like whenever,
I do
as
what I
soon as
can.
we go live, you have the best beginning. Like I think every episode we're coming in the middle of a conversation and you're saying something that's like wouldn't have led with that, but
I gotta pay Dan back for switching up my background the last 2 minutes before
that's
we
true.
start. That's what he gets.
That's true.
He knows who he married. Just saying.
So I think we're gonna have to do maybe a public poll to decide whether people like the picture backgrounds or not. Yeah, we're live, so it looks good. Hold on, where'd it go? Yeah, I see it.
He didn't take away the grouchy ladybug though. So.
All right, so as a reminder to you guys, since we've never done this before, if you want to, oh, hold on, let me mute that. There we go. So Becky and Katie, if you want to add comments to the comment stream that we see, go and open up the Facebook Live, and then click on our live picture thingamabob, and then you'll be able to add comments like this, and then bam, they should pop up on both sides. See, just like that. So, all right. Common Ground episode 5. Hello, America. Thanks for joining in. So I'm Chris, and we've got Katie San, apparently, and Miss Becky down there on the bottom. And we are here to talk about, so the topic of the day was probably guns somewhere, because it seems like we can never get away from the topic, but freedom of speech and censorship, because in light of the things that are going on in Afghanistan, I think that was probably the genesis of what got us down this road in the first place. And then how that might reflect with things going on here in the States as well. So that's what we're going to talk about. So who's got an opening thought?
Well, I kind of have this idea that one of us could actually read the, actual legislation, Constitution, and then one of us could like kind of search Fox News and CNN about because I think generally the three of us probably align more in one direction than other people. We can't seem to get guests that are a little bit more on the other side. So maybe if we could just try to kind of see what the two sides say about the topic, and maybe we can go from there. Just throw that out there.
I can bring it up. So we're going to look at First Amendment is where to go. That's not it. Bill of Rights.
Oh, and I did want to look up the Hatch Act as well.
Okay.
So Katie, a friend of mine who shall remain nameless, messages me on the side about our videos and some of the topics. But due to the Hatch Act and their job, they're not allowed to really have political views out there in the world, which actually I have another person that I went to high school with who I would love to be able to get on the show, because he's a teacher of like the Constitution and history and everything, but again, doesn't like to put anything political out there in the public. But I just thought that was really interesting to bring into this conversation, because I had never heard of the Hatch Act until I was told about it, and then I started reading it, and I was immediately triggered by the fact that it applies to everybody except for the president and the vice president. At least that was the first part that I read. I didn't finish reading it all, but I just thought that would be an interesting thing to bring into the conversation since we're talking about freedom of speech.
Yeah, so I pulled that up. I've never heard of the Hatch Act either. Are we talking about the one passed in 1939 that limits certain political activities of federal employees, as well as some state, DC, and local government employees who work in connection with federally funded programs? The law's purposes are to ensure that federal programs are administered in a nonpartisan fashion to protect federal employees from political coercion in the workplace, and to ensure that federal employees are advanced based on merit and not based on political affiliation. Is that it?
I believe so.
Okay. Interesting. I'm reading this from the U.S. Office of Special Counsel, interestingly enough. Oh, yeah. There are less restricted employees, further restricted employees. Interesting that there are different levels of restriction.
And like I said, whatever I was reading, it was like it doesn't apply.
Yeah. So most federal executive branch employees, except those listed under further restricted employees, are considered less restricted under the Hatch Act. Less restricted employees may take an active part in partisan political management or political campaigns. However, if you are a further restricted federal executive branch employee, you are prohibited from engaging in partisan political management or political campaigns. And those are generally individuals employed in intelligence and enforcement type agencies, except those appointed by the president. Interesting.
So I just sent a PDF that's very helpful. It says what a covered employee can and cannot do.
I'm gonna mute so you don't hear my crazy children.
So in summary, for those that are following along, you cannot be a candidate for an election. You can't use your authority to interfere with an election. And there's some sub-bullets about that. You can't knowingly solicit or discourage the participation in any political activity by anyone who has business before they're employing office. All right, so you can't discourage participation in political activities. You can't solicit, attempt, or receive a donation or contribution from a political party. You can't host fundraisers. You can't invite others to a fundraiser. You can't sell tickets to a fundraiser, and you can't send emails about fundraisers. You also may not engage in political activity, i.e., activity directed at the success or failure of a political party, candidate for partisan political office, or partisan political group, while the employee is on duty in any federal room or building while wearing a uniform and official insignia or using any federally owned or leased vehicle. You can't distribute campaign materials, can't display them, you can't perform campaign chores, you can't display partisan political buttons and stuff. You can't make political contributions. I think I said that already. You can't post a comment or a blog or a social media site that advocates for or against a political party, candidate for a partisan political office or partisan political group. And the last one, you may not email to do all the same stuff we already said. So basically, I think in a nutshell, the Hatch thing says that as a federal employee, you cannot interfere with elections or cast favor or disfavor to any particular party or candidate or campaign or whatever.
Yeah, and it looks like on the first page of that PDF, I'm looking at examples of individuals that are considered further restricted, and it's, I'm looking at the National Security Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, CIA. Just kind of picking a few out of here. The IRS, Customs, ATF. I don't know. I think that kind of makes sense to me.
It seems like getting on your off-duty time, you can, because what it does is you may express opinions about candidates and issues, and then it says if the expression is political activity, however, i.e., activity directed at the success or failure of a political party, candidate for partisan political office, or partisan political group, then the expression is not permitted while the employee is on duty while the employee is on duty in any federal room or building while wearing a uniform or official insignia or using any federally owned or leased vehicle. That kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you have one of those jobs, if you're on your own and you're not in uniform and you're not driving a company truck or a tank or whatever, then you can express opinions about candidates and issues. But the second you put on the badge or the uniform, you got to keep your mouth. I think your friend wasn't going to wear his uniform and connect on a work computer.
We are losing your audio, Chris.
Why?
You're better now. I think it was just your head was tilted down.
Yes, I think your friend would be in the clear, because he wouldn't be logging on presumably on a work computer, nor would he be
Or she.
in uniform. And since we're not, a Joe Biden action committee, probably be safe. But I understand his concern. You don't want to risk employment over something like this. But I am glad to hear that the Hatch Act does not mean that people who work in the federal government are not allowed to have an opinion about politics, because that would be an egregious act.
It's interesting to me that there is, that there's legislation passed on this. Think about any place of work where you wear a uniform, right? If you wear that uniform and then go conduct some sort of political fundraiser, for one party or another, you are essentially representing your employer if you're in uniform, federal government or not. Your employer most likely, unless they 100% agree with your views, may not be good with that. I don't know. Just seems like logic to me, but that might just be my brain.
Yeah, I wonder what was going on. It takes some time to research it. We don't really have time to unpack it here while we're filming, but it does make me wonder what might have been going on in the mid 1930s that would have caused Congress to feel like they needed to do something.
Well, it said something about it was named after Hatch. There was something going on, but and I don't know where I saw it. Didn't apply to the president or the vice president, but I am on Wikipedia, and it's like during the Trump administration, watchdog group Crew claims the White House or the OSC overlooked apparent Hatch Act violations until groups like Crew or government whistleblowers filed official complaints. That was my first thought, is when I heard about this Hatch Act, is like, how could I? And I'm honestly not just trying to Trump bash. I'm just saying a lot of the stuff that he would say in social media, to me, I felt like should our president be able to say things like that? And it seems like, to me, I would think this would apply, but I don't know.
It was actually.
And here oh yeah, I think you and I just found the same thing, didn't we, Chris?
I was reading about the background, like where it came from.
FDR.
No, it looks like it came. I was reading that it came from the Pendleton Civil Service Act of 1883. That was it prohibited civil employees from using their authority or influence to coerce another person or interfere with an election. And then in 1907, it was changed again to prohibit employees from taking active part in political management or campaigns. And in 1939, Congress passed the most deliciously titled "An Act to Prevent Pernicious Political Activities," otherwise known as the Hatch Act. And that expanded the whole thing out to all federal employees, not just those in civil service. In 1940, it was modified again. And then the Hatch Act Reform Amendment of 1993 significantly amended the act, and notably allowing most covered federal employees to engage in off-duty political activity. The act was most recently amended through the Hatch Act Modernization Act of 2012. The amendment expanded the available penalties for violations of the act and allowed for covered state or local employees to run for partisan elective office so long as the federal government did not fund the entirety of their salary. Interesting. So it was rough to start with, and then it looks like it's gotten better and better over time, and that off duty you can kind of do what you want. What did you find, Katie?
I found, basically this. I found the latter portion of what you found. This article talks about a scandal involving FDR and federal employees of the Works Progress Administration.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know about
FDR ally promised jobs promotions for campaigning.
that. Gotcha.
So kickbacks, right?
Yeah. There's a great movie.
It's all about who you know.
It really is. There's a great movie about the Works Progress Administration called well, it's based on a play, musical, whatever. I think it's just a play that has music in it, called The Cradle Will Rock. That's got Tim Robbins and bunch of people in it. It's really excellent. But it was a program to get American workers back to work again after the Depression in 1935. And it was the government funded like artists, funded like playwrights and musicians and things that would, not, it was like creating jobs, but it was like, you think about when we just had the pandemic, well, we're still kind of doing it right now, but you know what I mean? Like with the full lockdown, like Broadway shut down, right? All street performers, there's no street performers. Like the people that really paid like a heavy price in terms of employment was like the entertainment industry at large, because nobody's going out to do anything. So when you're like starving to death and eating, one potato for a whole family, nobody's going to go to Broadway either. So they the government opened up, which I thought was cool. It's probably one of the most artistic friendly things that our government ever did, to go and open up programs to fund mimes and people with puppets and stuff like that. But anyways, the movie is called The Cradle Will Rock, and it's really, really good.
Okay. So let me ask this. Why do we think that the president is exempt from the Hatch Act? What's the purpose of exempting him?
Well, then he couldn't act on his own behalf.
To sway people to vote for him?
Yeah, right.
But why is the president exempt from that, but not a congressman or a governor or a judge running for office?
That's
fundamentally, what's the difference?
It would seem as though that's a really excellent question. Are senators subject to the Hatch Act? I guess I would have to read more about that. I don't understand how they could campaign. I mean, we know they campaign for their friends, right? When they want other people to.
Sure, they endorse them, right? I mean,
yeah.
How is that not a violation, number one, and why aren't they exempt?
Right. Yes.
I mean, I get it, right? I get why that Hatch Act was put in place. It makes common sense. Don't give somebody something for voting for you. You should be voting based on the individual and what they're attesting to that they are going to, do once they are in office. But it just doesn't make sense that the two most powerful people in office would be exempt from those regulations. I don't know.
I wonder if they're more restricted or less restricted.
That's a good question.
That's a good question.
Here we go. I bet you they're less restricted, because I'm looking at the U.S. Office of Special Counsel, same as you were looking at. Less restricted federal employees may engage in partisan political management and campaigns. Such employees may be candidates, register and vote, assist in voter registration drives, blah, 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 blah.
Got it.
So that must be what it is. But some of them are going to be, the ones that are not going to run for office are the ones that can't have. So the Federal Elections Commission, Election Assistance Commission, the FBI, the Secret Service, the CIA, the NSA, all the scary mirrored sunglasses agencies, none of them can participate while in office. While in uniform.
I'm sure they actually used the word when I did my training for being for doing the elections. but like you're just trying to do the training and all that. But I know that like I was definitely told like you're not allowed to endorse any candidate, or like at one point one of the voters had dropped like a flyer for one of the candidates and like set it on the table and then like walked away. And I just, was having the next person come by and just taking their driver's license and getting them to the booth. And then my election judge was like, what is this? And I'm like, I don't know. She was like, we cannot have this here. And I'm like, I didn't really think about that. Like it makes sense, in that situation that we can sway who you should vote for. But I'm glad to know that I don't have to worry about that when I'm not actually doing that.
Yeah, you're not on official duty. You can do what you like.
I'm gonna poke this question a little bit further though. If the 1939 version of this legislation was passed as a result of our president doing things he wasn't supposed to be doing, we are enforcing stricter regulations for other people and not for the person that was caught in the act. Does that make sense?
It doesn't. So what did he do?
It says he promised jobs and promotions for campaigning.
Is that covered by another law now anyways?
Maybe. I don't know. Let's see.
Because I would think that's got to be illegal.
Kickbacks.
In the meantime, I found my Fox News article for censorship.
I don't even weigh 210 pounds. You've lost me. That's insane. The truth is that Hollywood's elite actor.
What is that?
That was the ad on my Fox News.
Oh.
It's like, did we just get Zoom bombed? Like, what?
Even the ads on Fox News are angry. Like, what the heck? That network needs to settle down.
Okay. What is this? There's a few things that I'm seeing, but I'd have to kind of dive in. I'm seeing the Anti-Kickback Act of 1986. There's a, but I need to dive. Yeah. That might be it. Let's see. Justice.gov. This is government contractors. This law attempts to make the anti-kickback statute more useful prosecutorial tool. Yeah, I mean, this looks like what we're looking for. Assuming, I mean, this is applicable to government contractors, though. Prohibited conduct. The act prohibits attempted as well as completed kickbacks, which include any money, fees, commission, credit, gift, gratuity, thing of value, compensation of any kind. So there's other things in here as well, but is the president considered a governmental contractor?
No.
Remember, I got my history lessons in Louisiana.
I was gonna say, I feel like none of us should be on Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? But
not this girl right here.
The beauty of Common Ground is that we're just common people.
We are.
Nobody is a constitutional lawyer here. We represent the regular folk who would sit at home and would turn to the media to tell them what to think.
Okay, I'll throw this out there while you're looking at that.
And we're saying you should turn to us to find out what to think.
Is it okay that like Facebook and Instagram and everyone that barred Trump, is that okay?
I'm sorry. Say that again.
Not allowing Trump to have a Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. Is that okay? Or is that against freedom of speech?
No, it's not. No, that's a private company. Right? So I can get thrown out of a Denny's for violating whatever Denny's doesn't like. It's not freedom of speech.
So then censorship is okay as long as it's a private business censoring.
What is censorship? I think the censorship only. Okay, this gets back to the First Amendment thing, which was meant to. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, semicolon, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, semicolon, or the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So the key element of it there is Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Congress shall make no law.
But do we personally feel like that should have happened?
That Facebook should allow Donald Trump to violate the terms of service of their service? I mean, why did they block him? That's the question first. Why did they block him?
Can I break it down to to a quick analogy here? If my kids have friends over and those friends are bringing language or whatever into my home that I don't deem age appropriate, maybe for my kids, I, as the parent and the owner of my home, have the right to ask that child to go home, right? I mean, it's my home. And same thing with Facebook, right? It's a private entity, and the fact that they set the rules. And when you log in for the first time, you have to press that button that I agree to the terms and conditions of this application. So if I agree to that on the forefront and then I violate it, well, Facebook had every right to kick him off, in my opinion, right? I mean, if those terms are laid out, he agreed to them, he violated them, see you later. It's like any other contract. I don't know. Just my thoughts.
I would agree as well. I don't think because he's the president that he is outside the scope of having to follow the terms of service of any business, right? Like the president still has to follow no shirt, no shoes, no service, right? Thank goodness for that one.
Yeah.
Of all the things I can and cannot tolerate Donald Trump doing over the term of his pregnancy, the not tolerate list would be him going to a Dunkin' Donuts in a Speedo. That's a no. That's a hard. That's impeachment. Can't take it.
So what about, it's not necessarily violating the terms of Facebook, but I know, like, Chris, it really bothers you when people just put complete misinformation out there on Facebook. It's just like floating around.
Oh yeah, because I feel like it's infringing almost on like inciting a riot. Do you know what I mean? Like if you, and there have to be, I'm certain that somebody figure this out. There has to be something out there with respect to the limiting of speech, that like yelling fire in a movie theater. You're not allowed to do that. There's a law that says you can't do that, right?
Yeah, it's the same thing as not being able to talk about bombs at an airport, right? Like,
yes, right.
There's a reason behind that. Yeah.
Right. And this is one of the things I tend to like get into discussions with Second Amendment folks with, because they want it to be like chisel and stone and have no boundaries whatsoever. And I'm like, well, then I want laser guns. I want nuclear weapons, right? It doesn't specify. It just says arms. I want arms. I want them all. I mean, obviously there's limits. And so when people put things online that are clearly incendiary, is that the right word? Fire catching, right? Are going to blow stuff up on purpose, and they are demonstrable lies. They're easily disproven. They're just meant to stir up, like all this stuff with how many people have died because of anti-vax posts online. More than zero.
But how do you judge that? Like, how do you say, oh no, this one's too much, this one's gonna cause problems, we need to censor that, versus, I mean, like, I just think of that, doctor that was pushing the hydro whatever, like
hydrochloroquine.
Chloroquine, yeah.
I think so. What? Okay, well then let's test the other ones, right? Let's see if we can work our way back to it. Why can't I yell fire in a movie theater? I mean, I can yell other words.
You're going
right?
to cause panic, right?
I could yell Beetlejuice if I want to, right? Why can't I? Yes. So what is my functional reason for yelling fire in a movie theater if there's no fire? I'm intending.
Oh, yeah. I have a point when we get to a break.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Give me 5 seconds. You can have. So I suppose that is my material line is, and this I feel like Tucker Carlson dances this line very, very dangerously close, right? Because I want to believe that he is not that dumb, and that he knows the things that he is saying are not true, but he's doing it to incite viewership. In his particular, he's looking to get people to come back and watch more of the show, but the additional impact of that is some people hear the insanity that he says and they take it as gospel truth and then they act on it. I mean, the Tucker Carlson America fully acted upon is a scary place.
So what about when Nancy Pelosi, because that totally felt like I'm just trying to piss people off.
The ripping up thing?
Mm-hmm.
What's the material harm that could come from that? So Tucker Carlson goes online and says that the vaccine has got microchips in it or whatever. I don't watch the guy. I see clips every now and then. I just know he's toxic. But like Tucker Carlson goes online and says something that is demonstrably false and is intended to incite hysteria amongst his people because he wants them to come back and watch more Verizon commercials. Right? It will have a material harm on the people that hear it and act upon it. What material harm will be caused by Nancy Pelosi being kind of a snotty little brat and ripping up paper on television? I agree it wasn't a cool move, but what is it? What harm does it incite?
But how much, like, because at the end of the day, it only takes a minute, right, to do some research on does the vaccine have a microchip in it? Like, just like, I guess to me, I'm just kind of wondering, like, if you yell fire in a movie theater, it only takes a minute to look around, to smell, oh, okay, the fire alarms are not going off. It's not great that someone should do that. But if there isn't actually a fire, you know, how horrible, like, what material harm is that going to cause enough that we need to, like, you know, kick this person out of the movie theater or whatever? I mean, I'm not saying I agree or disagree that we should do that. I'm just saying, like, there should be some accountability on whoever's listening to what you're saying to be like, you know, I mean, and Katie, originally when you posted about the whole censorship thing, you know, you started with talking about kids. And I feel like that's different, right? You're talking about a vulnerable population of people who developmentally, you know, without talking about someone who has developmental delays, developmentally, by the time you reach a certain age, is it really our job to, you know, put warning labels on Tide Pods? Like, I mean, again, that was, you know, kids ingesting them, but like, at what point do we say that, well, I mean, I'll use this story, like, my husband told me this story, like, there was this kid that ate a tub of butter and he didn't go to school the next day, and his dad was like, you didn't go to school because you ate butter, you stupid. But it's like, when do we put the accountability back on the audience in that situation?
So I think that's a great question. I posted on our chat an article, and there's a couple things that you said. One thing that I picked up from you, Becky, was like where do we draw the line essentially on that censorship, right? And how do we determine, like, I guess, how did they determine that they were going to take Trump off or something to that effect? But one of the articles that I heard or that I was listening to on one of the podcasts that I listened to in the morning, it was an NPR bit about Facebook misinformation and how responsible should Facebook be for ensuring that what is posted on their platform is valid information, right? And I mean, we know how hard it is to scale things in a small level with hundreds of people. And then you think about the bazillions of people who are logged into Facebook on, any given minute or at any given minute. And that becomes like a real problem, right? So their technology has to be able to scan for this and analyze it in some way. So they're using some form of data to figure all this out. But one of the really striking pieces of information that I picked up from that podcast was that there are 12 identified users, 12, count them 12, that are responsible for what Facebook is considering COVID misinformation, right? But if you look in the article, it says that they call them the disinformation dozen, that they produced 65% of the shares of anti-vaccine misinformation on social media platforms. 12 people produced 65%. That's huge. So I think when you talk about, kids they're vulnerable in the sense that they're developmentally not in the same place to analyze information the way that we are as adults. I agree with you. On one hand, I agree 100% with you. And then the other hand, I'm thinking, but we are a vulnerable population because we're getting our news from like all these social media platforms. And it's so hard to determine these days what's real and what's not. And furthermore, half the articles that you do read these days, they're all telling us how to think. They're not giving us the information. Like I've seen articles talking, the whole thing where they were taking the water bottles away in the voting lines in Georgia. I read an article about that a few months back. And they were talking about all the things, right, that somebody paraphrased from this legislation, but nowhere in that article was there a reference to the actual legislation that I could go and read for myself to figure out what was actually going on. But they told me how to feel in that article, and they told me what was going on. I mean, I remember when Obamacare was first coming out and 1,200-page bill, I went and found it and I started scanning and reading how much crap was in there, right? We've got healthcare in one sector, like this much of that bill, and then everything, I almost knocked that off. I'm so passionate here. I'm like, everything else was something else. It's like, that's what I want to read. So I think our population has just become completely vulnerable. And it's kind of scary that Facebook is now tasked with determining like what's real and what's not for us to see. I don't know. I'll be quiet now.
I have some information.
Ooh, is it information or misinformation?
We'll find out. It's I'm citing a court case, so it sounds
Okay.
information-y. So there was a court case in 1919 called Schneck versus the United States, which somebody named Schneck is going to cause trouble. Just saying, And apologies to the Schnecks out there in the world. I'm just saying it's a shifty name. All right, so this is talking about the shouting fire in a crowded theater. That phrase is a paraphrase of Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr.'s opinion on that
Clear
case.
present danger.
That's right. Where it was held that the defendant's speech that was in opposition to the draft during World War I was not protected free speech under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. And then it was overturned partially in 1969, which limited the scope of banned speech to that which would be directed to and likely to incite imminent lawless action. Example, a riot. So I would interpret that to mean if you post something that is inherently, and there was a word, the speech that is dangerous and false is not protected, as opposed to speech that is dangerous but is also true. So if you're saying something that's dangerous and it's false, and it would likely incite imminent lawless action, then it is not protected by the First Amendment. So going onto Facebook and saying, I think the vaccines are full of microchips, is a crap thing to say, but at the same time, it's not likely to incite imminent lawless action. Going onto Facebook and saying, I'll see you at the Capitol, it's life or death, and I'm maybe a government official, something like that, starts to feel very on the edge of that. Like, that's not protected speech, because there is a likelihood that people are going to hear that, and that is going to incite imminent lawless action. Which it would not surprise me to see this language in this case referenced in the trials that are in flight right now for the people that stormed and the people that potentially caused it. The Schneck case. Now you know. Saying what he was doing. So his actual words were, the most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. The question in every case is whether the words are used in such circumstances and are of such a nature as to create a clear and present danger, like you said, Katie, that they will bring about the substantive evils that Congress has a right to prevent. So in the sense that Congress is tasked with, keeping the public safe and things like that. So there you go.
So I posted a comment from a viewer. Get your guys' thought on that.
Do you know what's in vaccines? Have you read the CDC's stats or recommendations? We did, and there's just as much information on the pro-vax side as there's anti-vax side. Ask your doctor what's in a shot next time your kids go in. They don't have a freaking clue. Okay.
I think there's a really good point in there, right? Misinformation happens on both sides, sure. 150%. Like so I think that's a really good point to bring up. Just, I know the three of us are kind of in the same group, so I'm glad, Becky, that comment came in your way, because that's something we definitely don't need to overlook.
So I'd be interested to know from that user, is understanding, like, I don't know if a doctor prescribed me like a cough syrup.
Very dangerously close, right? Because
Becky. So like if a doctor prescribed a cough syrup, or an allergy medicine, like I don't have enough information to know what's in any of that stuff either. But I know that I take the cough syrup that the doctor prescribes and I stop coughing and my lungs clear up and I get better. Right? I put many things into my body. What's in a Big Mac? Fully. I don't know. Deliciousness?
Well,
meat?
They have to produce, I mean, on the devil's advocate side there, McDonald's and anybody who's producing a food that goes into your body has to produce a list of ingredients. You don't know the concentrations, but you know what's in that. You can look that nutrition information up.
Honestly, ingredients of a now, in fairness, Big Macs are not being forced by anybody for any purpose whatsoever.
Yeah.
Well, it says it includes mouth-watering perfection, so that's good. So, but nutrition information tells me like a breakdown of the view ingredients. Here we go.
And here's an article from uchealth.com on vaccine active ingredients. I would be really sad if my doctor couldn't, or my child's pediatrician could not relay this information. And being a biology major and spending some time in virology and microbiology classes for a while there, just vaccines in general, I mean, they're actually pretty simple. So I think for those of us that have that type of background, it might be a little bit less daunting to kind of think of what's going into these things. But we're looking at mRNA, right? Where that mRNA is coming from, that's a question always. And then adenovirus.
In terms of it being like fetal tissue. It's
Did you
true.
say?
Well, so this is one of the things that somebody had raised to me as a concern. So there was it's the Moderna one and the Pfizer one used. I'd have to go back and you can Google it too. But it doesn't use like parts of aborted babies or anything like that. But there was one single abortion in the Netherlands in 1973 that they collected liver cells from that one abortion in the Netherlands in 1973. And since then, they have been propagating those liver cells and they use them in the testing of various medicines to make sure that they don't kill us. But the people who are anti-vax and pro-life will say that because the vaccine makes use of abortive material, that therefore it violates religious protections, which it's sort of a reach.
I don't. Yeah, we might be getting off topic here, but go read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks and look at the waves that it caused for the family members years and years. I mean, to very recently, right? And I mean, that's the same story, right? They took her cells and they've been doing cancer research off of them for years. Great for cancer research and the benefits that have come from it for sure. But, at a personal level, that's your body, right? So I kind of get the analogy of, of where they're coming from the abortion and pro-life stance on that. Yeah.
So coming back to the ingredients thing, it's an interesting one because I feel like we're at a curious time in just human development, right? Where we're as smart as we ever have been as a species, but the level of information that we have available to us, right or wrong, is massive, right? And that's a very new thing. Even just, I mean, how the three of us have been alive in an America where if you wanted to look something up, you had to find it in a book in the library, right? If you didn't, I mean, there was in 1980, if you wanted to know what was in a vaccine, if your doctor didn't know, you were not going to find out.
Right.
You just dealt with it, right?
In 19 what?
80.
Oh, okay. I said 1918. I was like, wait, hold up a second.
Yeah, there's not that much gray in the beard. Yeah.
Well, and I know it's just like a line or whatever, but like Chris, you've said this before. It's like, okay, so I've heard people who are afraid to take a vaccine because they don't know what's in it, but how many over-the-counter supplements do they take that are not approved by the FDA? Like,
sure.
And it's just for us personally. I mean, obviously, like there's many different factors, but ultimately, like we had COVID, right? So we knew how terrible it was. It was awful for us. And Dan potentially has long-term effects from this. We don't know yet. It's probable. We don't know because it's still so new, right? So ultimately for us, it was like, I mean, we don't know the long-term effects of COVID. So we definitely don't know the long-term effects if we catch COVID multiple times without any sort of protection. And yes, we might have some natural antibodies, but I never took the flu shot until I started at Empyrean sometime around 2013 or 14. We went on a ski trip. My nephews picked up, I'm pretty sure it was flu B. It was like the really nasty one. And basically everybody on the family trip that had their flu vaccine did not catch it. And everybody who did not have their flu vaccine caught it. And I was a young, healthy, I've never had any sort of problems, like outside of a few stomach viruses, whatever. But that flu knocked me out for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, like I couldn't get out of bed. I was so sick. It was so miserable. And I was like, all right, well, my company offers free flu shots at work. Let me just go ahead and start taking these. Ever since I started taking the vaccine, I have never caught the flu where it was that bad again. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, I was kind of like okay, yeah, there's stuff in there. I don't know what's in there, but it's like you said, Chris, it's like, I don't know what's in antibiotics, but if I got a really bad sinus infection and my head feels like it's about to explode and I can't breathe out of my nose, I'm going to give that a shot.
I mean, I was at Smoothie King the other day. They're just dumping powders. I don't know what's in any of those things, but I still got a smoothie. So I looked it up. I'm on the CDC website, and I'm going to assume that the three of us and everybody that's listening on here is not some kind of a chemist or microbiologist or whatever. That your garden variety. So this is the point I was making about regular old Americans having access to information that not even that long ago we just wouldn't have had at all, right? So the Moderna. I'm going to put the link in the shitty chat.
In the what?
The shitty chat.
Oh, I like the shitty chat. I was like, what's going on here, man?
You got to keep up. I'm going to put it in the thingamabout so you guys can read for yourselves. And somebody might have actually looked at this already. I just Googled it anyways. So you tell me when you hear something you understand. Nucleoside modified mRNA encoding the viral spike S glycoprotein of SARS-CoV-2. That's the active ingredient. I'm going to read.
Say that one more time.
Yeah, I'm going to read.
Nucleoside.
Yeah, I'm going to read 3 of the inactive ingredients just because they're fun. PEG 2000-DMG :1,2 dimestroyl rack glycerol mexoxypolyethylene glycol, and then SM-102 heptadeacon-9-YL 8-2 left parens 2 hydroethyl close parens open parens 6 oxo 6 open parens undecaloxy close parens hexyl close parens amino close parens oxanoate.
Yeah.
So if we were to go, okay, America, full disclosure, here's what's in it. What are people going to do with that?
They're gonna look it up if they've got a true vested interest in it. They're gonna look it up. They're gonna learn about it, and they're gonna make a better informed decision. I'm personally in this realm where I'm like actually going to the New England Journal of Medicine to better understand the statistics behind vaccinations in adolescents, so I can make a truly informed decision about my daughter. But like we are, as much as we don't know the long-term effects of COVID, and I'm vaccinated, we don't know the long-term effects of the vaccine either, right?
Sure.
We've had the flu vaccine, people have been taking that thing for years now. So we know the relative side effects and the long-term effects. Chickenpox, measles, mumps, rubella, right? Like, all those things, we've had years and years and years of data. So we can make better informed decisions because we know lots of people who have taken them and lots of people who have lived a really long time.
But yes, and you're making an excellent point, which is you're making informed decisions based upon data that you can consume at your level of knowledge and understanding.
Yeah.
Click on the last link I just sent.
And just to throw it out there as well, the individual that I got that first comment from, I think it's a fair point to say that a lot of people treat anti-vaxxers like they're just not science-based at all, when in fact they're ideally they're doing the same thing we're doing, right? They're researching to the best of their ability, to their comfort, to make a decision that is not an easy decision to make. And it's not. And I've had people ask me, like, if they come out with a vaccine for the girls, are we going to do it? I'm like, honestly, all I could say is when it comes to that area, I rely completely on the dude that does all the research and is in the medical field, and like he's constantly researching that stuff. I have just like he has every faith that I am going to make the best choices for healthcare for our family, as far as, you know, the plans that we have, or how to figure out what the bills are and if we're paying too much, because that's my subject matter, right, for our family. And I mean, I will do my own research as well, but ultimately when it comes down to it, if he's not comfortable, it's going to be hard pressed for me to try to convince him that we need to do it. But then vice versa, if he's like, I'm fully comfortable with this, I don't have a problem being like, well, if you're comfortable with it, then I know that you've done, you know. But again, it's scary, right?
Go click on that link I just sent, Becky.
Yeah. While you click, Becky, that's a really good point that you bring up too. And I just think about, like, at some point, you know, you have some sort of cardiac event, completely unrelated to COVID or something like that, right? Or you get diagnosed with cancer or something like that, and your doctor is all of a sudden in front of you presenting you with two different options, right? You've got plan A or plan B. You don't know what the outcome of plan A or plan B is. And the same way we would look at somebody who picked plan A over plan B for their cancer treatment. I really feel like we should be looking at you know, the anti-vaxxers the same way. Like, people aren't out there just being like, F it, I just don't want to do it.
Right.
They have strong convictions that they, you know, the same way that pro-vaxxers have them. So it's an interesting place to be in America, and all of a sudden feel like your freedom is, and I think this is what people feel, is that your freedoms are being kind of stripped away from you, you know, in the workplace, in the public, you know, wherever you go. Like, all of a sudden you're being told you have to do this. And that's just the complete antithesis of what we were all raised to believe, is we live in this free country. So I don't know, there's lots of hard stuff to deal with in that decision, I think.
Almost everybody, though, that is an adult and making these arguments right now was vaccinated when they were children, and that's why they got to go to public school.
But again, remember, your chicken pox, your MMR, like all of those things. Well, I wasn't even vaccinated for chicken pox, right? So like when I had kids and they're like, hey, let's give them the chicken pox vaccine. I'm like, huh? What? Like, don't I just bring them in the room with the other chicken poxers and go give them the virus? They're like, no. You know, but we took these things, you know, number one, probably because our parents lived in the polio era and saw what polio did to individuals, right? So they're like, yep, sign me up for all the vaccines. But there's a lot of controversy that includes autism as a relation to vaccines. That's a huge argument out there. So there are plenty of people out there that don't want to vaccinate their kids because of that. But a lot of us just know that, like, hey, we took them as kids, so why not just give it to my kid, because I'm a healthy adult at this point. But I guarantee you, any parent out there who thinks that their child's autism is related to their vaccination is probably not vaccinating any subsequent kids that come along.
Sure. So I'm going to make a declarative statement, I think, from the way I kind of view this. By the way, did either of you learn anything from that link I sent you? Are you more?
I'm going to read it when I.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
My nighttime reading.
I encourage anybody who's like, there's literally nothing in there that's English.
Whatever this canonical smiles is, I really want to know more about that.
I'm not a more informed consumer because I looked that up. Right, I just have a headache. Anyways, here's my thought, and it ties back to the yelling fire in a movie theater thing. So it's interesting that we talked about that and then we talked about this, because if a person wants to not trust vaccines because whatever reason, doesn't matter, right? Freedom, right? Freedom of choice. If you don't want to vaccinate your kids, nobody is forcing people to vaccinate children. It might prevent you from using public schools. Like, you're going to pay consequences. I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where trucks are going to show up and jab needles in people's arms. I think you'll pay consequences that might make regular life tedious. But anyways, the point I'm trying to get at is
what happened. Just before we leave that, I just want to know what happened with polio, right? Like, they completely eradicated that disease with the vaccine, but how did they get everyone vaccinated? I'm just wondering.
All I will say the only thing that I know on that subject is one of my friend's fathers had polio, and I know he like when the pandemic first came out and we were waiting for vaccines before they were available, he made a Facebook post about how, the first several polio vaccines didn't work. So he was like, he was almost like disappointed that he's like, don't expect this first vaccine to work because they don't always work, the way they're supposed to. Even though he's ultimately like recommends that people get vaccinated because, he had polio and it impacted him very negatively. And obviously he would not wish that upon anyone. But yeah, so it sounds like there was multiple versions that failed. And then I'm sure at that point, it seemed like everybody was so ready to get rid of polio that they were all just like, all right, let's do this.
I have an answer for this, but I want to finish the thing I was going to say. So I have an answer that involves Elvis. You'll like it. But the other thing I wanted to say is people can make the choice for whatever they want. They can make the choice for whatever they want for their kids. But the second they go onto Facebook or Twitter or TikTok or whatever and try to incite other people in the public forum to do what they're doing off of their own belief, then I start to have trouble, because now it's not just they're making a choice for themselves, they are drawing doubt and fear into a situation that is not helped by that. If everybody can go and govern for themselves and decide, that's one thing. But Facebook has, and these types of things have a hold on the American psyche these days that just didn't exist back then.
So I'm going to challenge you on that though, Chris, because this goes back to that whole who is the judge of what is insightful, right? Like when everybody was putting their Facebook status with "I got my vaccination," like I feel like that's kind of doing what you're saying. Like if all of your friends have that little thing that says "I got my vaccination," I would feel like, to me, if I didn't want the vaccine and I saw all my friends doing that, yep, I would feel pressured.
Maybe so. What is the measurable, demonstrable harm compelling someone through peer pressure to get the vaccine? What scientific evidence exists? What evidence exists outside of InfoWars or something like that says that if a person gets a vaccine, they are going to be in more material danger than if they did not? Because I can give you about every medical journal on the planet that says the opposite.
But we just discussed that these individuals are doing their own research, and by their own accord, they're doing what they feel is the best choice for them. So I feel like you're discounting that if you're saying, what is the...
yeah, so I'm going to be a little bit of a jerk, and I'm going to say I am discounting what they're doing, because if somebody is going out into the internet to try and understand that thing that I just tried to read and say, okay, what are the ingredients of the Moderna vaccine, and reading that list and thinking that they have the foggiest hope of translating all that stuff into a meaningful understanding. If they were molecular biologists or something, then I would say, okay, yeah, you have enough information to make a determination as to what all that is, and I bet you those people will get vaccinated. But I strongly suspect, let me finish the sentence. I strongly suspect that the people who are making the decision to not get vaccinated are not making it on facts that they found in medical journals. They are making it based on emotions and in their own feelings that somehow it feels unsafe, and so they're not going to do it. It's a feeling of distrust based in nothing.
The New England Journal of Medicine article that I was reading last night, the statistics on adolescents who have been vaccinated and not vaccinated, I think it was a study of like 3,500 adolescents. Mm-hmm. There was not a significant distinction that they could pull away with to say yes or no, this is favorable. And yet, even though it said that in the article, it was interesting. There was another line that said it was favorable. So I think that I disagree with that statement, because I am in that position with my daughter, and I am trying to understand that information at the biological level, right, and at the chemistry level here to really understand in the data that's being presented. So I disagree. I think that there might be some. I think we're going to have some on either side, right? Some people are making emotional decisions, and some people are really, really trying to understand, and some people really believe in holistic medicine and things like that, or believe that their bodies are strong enough to fight off the virus. So I think,
and some people believe what their parents taught them, right? Like, okay, well, I ate a bunch of dirt and I survived. Like,
and I don't have a fundamental issue with anybody making that decision for themselves. I have a fundamental issue with somebody going on Facebook saying, "Don't trust science."
Yeah.
That to me is the borderline inciting a riot thing. It's creating a fundamental issue. So, anyways, back to the polio thing to answer the question. This is an article from NPR. I'll post the link. It said that the polio vaccine had overwhelming public acceptance, while stubborn pockets of vaccine hesitancy persist across the U.S. for COVID. Why the difference? One reason historians say is that in 1955, and you got to think about 1955 and like spaceship movies and sciencing and things and stuff like that, many Americans had an especially deep respect for science. If you had to pick, this is a quote, if you had to pick a moment as the high point of respect for scientific discovery, it would have been then, said David M. Oshinsky, a medical historian at New York University and the author of Polio, An American Story. He goes on, after World War II, you had antibiotics rolling off the production line for the first time. People believed infectious disease was being conquered. And then this amazing vaccine is announced. People couldn't get it fast enough. So people were getting the polio vaccine because there was a public confidence and faith. This is just a belief, right? That science is good and is working in their best interest. And because of that, there is no more polio. But I can go on the internet and yell fire about the COVID vaccine, and somebody else will yell fire, somebody else will yell fire, somebody else will yell fire. And next thing you know, there's millions of people who won't get vaccinated because there's a whole bunch of people yelling fire. It's not the personal choice thing. It's the incitement of fear that it is causing across the country from a bunch of people who aren't doing, Katie, what you're doing, making intelligent, informed decisions. They're reacting on fear drummed up off the internet.
Yeah.
So
that's the only thing I have.
Real quick. I really want to continue with this discussion. I'm super passionate about it, but I have a kiddo that I have to go pick up. She is awaiting for me at this point. But I'm definitely looking forward to continuing the conversation with you guys.
We'll part to it some other time.
Cool.
We'll let you do your little exit.
Bye.
Bye. So one thing that I would also say is important to consider is in the 1950s, science was about science. I'm assuming based on what you just said. Whereas nowadays you have distrust in vaccines or whatever because, big pharma, right? All of these pharmaceutical companies, and there's all, the Johnson & Johnson, do they really and truly care about our health, our public health, or do they care about getting a piece of COVID vaccine, right?
But was the Johnson & Johnson, were those vaccines produced in a bubble that Johnson & Johnson? I'm just
saying that is a view out there that's why people don't necessarily, it's not just science to them. It is the people who are making these vaccines,
right.
It's not just about science anymore, and
why is it not just about science? What else has it become? Do you mean it's politics, or do you mean there's just a lack of faith in the companies that make vaccines because they have a name now called Big Pharma, and that's scary?
Well, I mean, why are there only 3 vaccines? Like, why are there only 3 people who have made vaccines that are now distributed to everyone? If it was just about science and there were all these other companies that could invest in to do this, like it seems odd to me that there's only, and I'm just saying in general, our society is skeptical of the pharmaceutical companies in general, and I'm kind of on that bus myself.
So I'm looking at September 9th, 2020. There were 6 companies racing to mass produce a coronavirus in 2021. This is an article published September 9th of last year. So there were 6 at the time. Novavax, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, Sanofi, GlaxoSmithKline, Moderna, and Pfizer. So of the 6, Pfizer and BioNTech, looks like they partnered. So there were 6 who had the resources and the time. I guess that's the same thing. The resources, money, probably, to stand this stuff up, because like Moderna. So they're like Novavax had a manufacturing capacity of 2.75 billion doses at a cost of $16 a dose. Johnson & Johnson could produce over 1 billion. Moderna 500 million to 1 billion, which is why there's less Moderna. Pfizer and BioNTech hundreds of millions. So how many pharmaceutical companies existed at the time that had the resources to stand up millions up to 1 billion vaccines in the amount of time that was necessary? It looks like September last year there were 6 in the running and 3 won. That's what it seemed like at the time. I just don't think that there. I mean, how many can there be that would have the means to develop it that quickly and to be able to produce it and get it out into the world?
I don't know. I was just throwing that, like I said, I was throwing that out there.
It's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought of it myself, but it does make sense that not every pharmaceutical company in the world is going to have the resources to even attempt something like that. There were 6 in September, and that whittled down to 3. There might have been more who thought, hey, yeah, we could do that, and then they just never even made the news. So I want to come back to the thing you were talking about, though, that was interesting, that it's more than just science. And it ties into this. It ties into this broader concept of fear, doubt, distrust in general, right? So to some degree, as a functioning society, we have always, up until very recently, we have always had to we sort of had to, whether we liked it or not, choose to extend some level of trust in certain organizations, and that there was enough, like the Pfizer vaccine wasn't developed by Pfizer with closed doors and then they just put it in vials and sent it out the door. I'm sure it was reviewed by scientists all over the world, right, before it went anywhere. Like the number of eyes that have been on that thing to say, yeah, it's in good order, I'm sure is astronomical. So in order for any of this stuff to work, how do I know that the tar in the road doesn't give me cancer? Nobody has said that yet, but if somebody puts it on Facebook tomorrow and 10 million people click it, now everybody's going to think the road gives you cancer, right? It is possible on any topic that it exceeds our regular understanding as just average citizens to go out into the community and spread fear that will create distrust in almost any social structure that we have. What's in the metal that's in the chains that hold swings in the playground? I don't know. Does it cause cancer? No. But could I plant a fear in somebody that it does? Absolutely. And if that spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads, I mean, that's the thing with the vaccines and autism. The original report that attempted to make a link, we could Google this, that there was a link between vaccines and autism was debunked. It was a garbage report. But by the time somebody got a hold of it and ran with it, it was like the cat was out of the bag. And so now, I mean, fear is a heck of a thing.
So, and one of the comments that we had was on that, it was no true control groups. The autism studies only tested a couple of ingredients in like 1 or 2 shots, not the combined effect. And also another comment, which Ryan DiCarlo, he said, hi guys, by the way.
Hey.
His opinion is that the COVID vaccine is a big deal because it got politicized. if it had not been politicized,
Agree.
it would probably still be the same small group of anti-vax folks, but nowhere near what we're seeing now.
I agree. I think the masks are the same thing. Social distancing is the same thing. The need to, shut businesses down for a little while to allow this thing to not spike the hospitals like is happening right now. It's the same thing. I agree.
One thing that I was thinking about earlier is we're talking about pro-vaxxers and we're talking about anti-vaxxers, and we believe that we should be able to make the choices that we think are best for our families and ourselves, right? But is anybody looking this at the shoes from the shoes of our public officials who, for us, we're just making the decision for 4 of us, right? Me, Dan, my kids, right? But our public officials, they're making the decisions on behalf of hundreds of thousands of people, and that can't be easy, right?
Yeah.
And I don't feel like enough people are talking about it from that perspective either, right? It kind of comes back to that we all live in a society, so what do we owe to each other? And I thought one of the things I thought was really interesting, and I posted the article that you had sent me about the Catholic Church on the whole saying, I don't want to do the vaccine because of aborted fetus cells or whatever. But one of the things that it said, and actually in our town hall recently, one of the other employees said the same thing. He was like, for me, I believe that I should vaccinate and I should try to take measures because as a Christian, it's better for me to protect all of us than to choose not to do something. And it's kind of the same sentiment that was in the article that you found about the Catholic Church. Is like,
Sure.
It's actually more Christian and Catholic to think about the greater good of everyone versus just, saying, oh, it's just against my religion. I don't, no, thank you. But I mean, it's hard. It's hard. All of it's hard.
Mhm.
It's scary
people-
times. And
Again, there's a part of me that wants to not really be a jerk and sort of let people just make decisions. And again, people make decisions for themselves. I don't care. It's when they vocalize it in public forums in an attempt to gather people around their particular campfire that I start to have a problem. That when people cite religion, okay, I'm just going to say it. I don't believe them. I don't believe that their religious convictions are deeply offended by the fact that this vaccine was tested on liver cells that were harvested from a voluntary abortion in the Netherlands in 1973. I don't believe their religious convictions are that strong. I just don't. I think they don't want to get the vaccine for whatever reason they choose to not want to get it. And they are using religion as a shield because you can't argue against that, right? Nobody's going to say you're not allowed to have religious freedom. So it's an easy one to throw out there and say, oh, my religion. But it just doesn't fundamentally make any sense, especially when with the articles that you're mentioning that I sent, all of the major churches, including the Catholic bishops and the Catholic Church itself, came out and said exactly what you just said, that getting the vaccine, wearing masks, and social distancing and all that kind of stuff is the compassionate, loving thing to do for our neighbor. I'm not buying that people are that devout, that a liver cell from 48 years ago is like, oh no, that's just beyond the pale. I don't buy it.
And just another comment that was out there: Facebook censors lies. Whole Foods won't sell high fructose corn syrup. Parents put parent controls on tablets. These are all the same to me. Everyone doing what they think is best for the greater good within their own arenas. So I think that kind of follows along with what we just said, is that
Sure.
that idea that yes, you have the phrase that I think of on this is the whole "you're right to swing your fist in at my nose," whatever that phrase is. It's like, yes, you have the no, we can't force you to put a needle in your arm or wear a mask or whatever. But at the same time, you can have your groceries delivered to your doorstep. You can have everything, and most people can work from home right now. Obviously, it's not always the case, but we live in a world today where, okay, if you don't want to wear a mask to go into HEB, then don't go into HEB. Like, do curbside pickup and leave your window up, show your code through the window, and let them put the groceries in the back of your car. Mm-hmm. And I think this goes back to it's more politicized than anything else, because I mean, the first, I never even thought about it at all. It was just like, we wear masks now. I'm like, okay, I mean, all right. Like, okay, cool. Like, it stops me from like picking my nose and touching my face. I need help doing that anyway. It's like, I have a bad habit. I pick my lips.
Sure.
So,
well, and how many people would just put the mask on and moved on with their lives and not even thought about it? If Tucker Carlson and Fox News and had not come online and said, this is violating your civil liberties. That's that fear mongering thing is, I mean, it is so incredibly dangerous.
I feel like we need the Hatch Act for like social media, or like at least public, public, media sources. We'd have to come up with a sexier name, though. Hatch Act.
So, I looked it up, by the way, that autism thing, the study. So it says that this is from, what is this from? The U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health. It says, the article is called Lancet Retracts 12-year-old article linking autism to MMR vaccines. 12 years after publishing a landmark study that turned tens of thousands of parents around the world, which more than that now, against the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine because of an implied link between vaccinations and autism, the Lancet has retracted the paper. In a statement published on February 2nd, the British Medical Journal said that it is now clear that several elements of a 1998 paper it published by Dr. Andrew Wakefield and his colleagues are incorrect, contrary to the findings of an earlier investigation. Dr. Richard Horton, editor of The Lancet, declined through a spokesperson to speak about this issue. And then it goes on to tell the history of the whole thing and Dr. Wakefield and all that other kind of stuff. So this is an example of I mean, to me, this is yelling fire in a movie theater. Somebody published an irresponsible medical paper, and that got into the world, and now many families are not only not getting vaccinated, but they are further propagating the fear that these vaccines are going to give your kids autism, therefore don't vaccinate your kids. And at some point in time, we're going to have measles, mumps, and rubella sweep through America, because if enough of these families don't get vaccinated, that we start to turn the herd immunity back around the other direction. And the whole thing is based upon a medical journal entry that was determined to be false and was retracted. But fear has been spread, and it's impossible to unspread it. I am all for people's individual liberties. I am not for them spreading fear. I feel like I've alienated a lot of people in the probably gonna watch this thing.
I mean, I just kind of keep going back. For me personally, I'm like, there's still like, we're all adults and we can do our own research. It's I don't know. It's hard.
We
can. At the end of the day, and I think both of us, maybe we should put the disclaimer out there that if you don't want to get the vaccine, don't get the vaccine. Like, we're not saying that everyone like you have to take it. We're not trying to force it, but it's, I don't know. I lost my train of thought.
I would agree with you. I don't think I would want anybody to come off of this and think that Chris is saying you have to go out and get the vaccine, or even you should go out and get the vaccine.
I want people to get the vaccine because I don't want them to die. And the numbers are showing that the ones that are dying right now, 99% of them are unvaccinated.
Yes.
So
right.
And I know how terrible it was to have this. And it's it's amazing if you're one of those people that you had it and you didn't even know it because you didn't have symptoms
Right.
before the vaccine. But for
Well,
those of us who had horrible symptoms, like your wife,
yeah.
I wouldn't wish that upon anyone. And
Yeah.
if
I mean, I can't even right now, if you go scroll online, you'll find videos of people on respirators and stuff. You know what I mean? And they're saying, "Oh, I wish I'd got the," or whatever, or family members are speaking for them. I can't watch those because the people who are making these decisions of going out into the world and spreading this, like, don't wear a mask, don't get, you'd never be allowed to go in there. And thank God that most people are never going to have to do this. But I guarantee you, the thing that will change your entire heart, mind, body, and soul on this topic is go for a walk through the COVID ward in the hospital. Becky, I'm not the same person. Even if I was already broken before I got to her room. Do you know what I mean? I walked past 6 or 7 other people on their stomachs, on their sides. You could watch them, their chests like lurching to try and survive this thing. It's not the flu. So for anybody saying that, it's just not. And to look at that situation and then to stand outside of her glass and decide, okay, today's the day she dies. Becky, I don't get to come back from that. I'm gonna be in that moment for I don't even know how long, forever maybe. And so when people are in the world and making this argument that the vaccines are bad for you, or dangerous, or untested, or not approved by the FDA, and you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't do that, or you should distrust science, or you should distrust that, you haven't been there. You haven't stood in that room and smelled death in the air and watched somebody take their last gasp. Who, by the way, Rochelle missed the COVID vaccine being available for her age group by a month. If she had got COVID a month later, she would have had the vaccine because she was a frontline person. She was working at Dev. She's working with the kids all day long. There's no masks in that place. She would have been one of the first ones lined up with all the other, like, medical workers and stuff. I just, it's, I akin this to people having an opinion about this Afghanistan thing without having any experience with war whatsoever. I'm being very cautious to not, like, I want to be compassionate to the people who were impacted by this, and I want to, have an open, loving mind towards anybody that's negatively impacted by this. But it wouldn't even for a moment cross my mind to cast judgment on anybody that is trying to work through this disaster, because I don't have any frame of reference to judge them. It's a miserable situation, and I'm just going to choose to believe that everybody that's involved in that is doing their best. Do you know what I mean? Or I could, with no information at all, just dump on everybody because from my cheerleader seat off in the side, I think they're doing it wrong. I don't know. I'm off the chain. I struggle with that Monday morning quarterback thing of just judging things you don't have any knowledge of. And then on top of it, going to other people and spreading fear so that now they're spun up about it too. So we can't trust medicine. We can't trust doctors. We can't trust people that go to college. Dr. Fauci is an idiot. No, he's not. You know how long that guy's been in medicine? Dr. Fauci is not an idiot. Dr. Fauci is he's probably the only smart guy in the room in many cases. But now he's a villain, right? The Fire Fauci Act. How insulting. Yeah, I don't think always that that giving all of us average Americans the amount of information that we have has necessarily always produced a positive outcome.
I have to agree with you on that. Like, it's like on one end, when I first had Hannah, it was like, I am at the crossroads of, I have way too much information for what could possibly be going on with the color of her poop to like
sure,
not not having enough information. Like, it's
right.
it's overload sometimes, and I think that's what a lot of people do as well, and I think about your analogy when we always talk about at work. You're like, no one gets up and goes into work thinking, I'm going to do a shitty job today.
Right.
Like everybody's trying,
Right.
And I just think, I think all of us just need to stop. All of us just need to remember, like, hey, I know you. You're my sister, my cousin, my best friend, my coworker that I've known forever. Like, we're not each other's enemies, and we're not stupid. Like, just because you've made a different decision, like, we just need to stop letting things be politicized and letting people turn us against each other. And we just need to start talking to each other and just being like, hey, why do you feel that way? Like, what, like, I thought it was really interesting when Katie started talking about how much research she was doing for that, because I knew she was immediately going and getting the vaccine for herself when they were first available. So I knew she wasn't,
Sure.
But hearing her talk about it, I was like, oh, okay. Like, so yeah, that's just my 2 cents. Like, let's try not to politicize it. Let's just talk to each other. We all have some really reasonable points, and we're coming from different places, right? I think no matter what, your experience with Rochelle is going to drive, no matter what you believed before or what you might have believed if she hadn't passed away, that's going to impact how you, like you said, forever, on how you make decisions on stuff like this. And we each have our own reasons and things like that as well. So,
Sure. Yeah, and like I said, I'm in support of everybody making their own decisions for their own lives, same as Katie and everybody else, right? She has to look out for herself, and she has to look out for her kids, and everybody has the right to individually do that. The only thing I would dispute in all of this is when people are, oh, I heard a thing to be afraid of, now I'm going to spread that fear. It's like this gossip wheel, right? That just goes around and around and around. Why are you afraid? Oh, because so-and-so said I should be afraid. Why are they afraid? Oh, because so-and-so said I should be afraid. And it just goes on and on and on. And nobody knows why they're afraid. They just know the thing that they heard and that they should be afraid of it. I mean, I know Katie. She's smarter than me. So if anybody's going to figure out that stupid webpage and what all that crap means, it's going to be Katie.
Hey,
right?
That's why I said when it came to that, I rely on that guy.
Right. Yeah. So like, I look at that webpage and I'm like, you know what? That vaccine could have like cheese whiz in it, and I would not be able to read that page and know that if that was the chemical symbol for cheese whiz. So I'm going to choose to trust. At the end of the day, what I trust, Becky, I trust that at the end of the day, if there was anything truly nefarious going on, that everybody wants to get on Oprah and have a book deal, right? All it would take is one person to be like, "Oh, I've got the goods. The AstraZeneca, whatever, the Johnson and Johnson virus has got monkey pee in it. Like, you guys, you don't even know, right?" And they're on Oprah. They've got a book deal. They're multimillionaire. They're world famous for busting off the top off the monkey pee conspiracy. And to the degree that the collective society at large hasn't, like, aside from just fear mongering, hasn't come up with a compelling collective story that the vaccines have monkey pee in them, I'm just going to assume they don't. And you know what I mean? Because if they did, somebody would have said it. because fame, because money, right? Not because I'm trusting people to be good. I'm trusting them to be selfish and money grubbing jerks, and be like, no, this is my moment. Like, then one would do it, right?
Fair enough.
So, anyways, yeah. All right. Anyways, so anybody's watching this, listening to it, do what you want. I'm not trying to tell you how to live. I'm just saying, if you don't know, don't spread fear. It just seems like a good rule of thumb.
Is that your closing statement?
Yes. If you don't know, don't spread fear. I'm gonna get t-shirts. All right, we're over time.
Yeah. Good combo though.
Yeah, for sure.
Hopefully someday we'll get more people to come talk to us.
Yeah, I think
people with different opinions than us.
Yes, well, I think that's part of the benefit of saying things that are gonna just irritate some people sometimes is, you know,
Come talk to us. Hey, America.
at least come on to just tell Chris to can it, right? If nothing else.
I gotta
Yeah.
listen to this guy all the time. He
That's
just
right.
he comes up with all this crazy shit, and I gotta listen to it all the
If
time.
you think I'm an
Somebody
idiot,
else.
there's more boxes will fit in this thing. Come on and tell me I'm an idiot. I would love to have the conversation. All right. Thank you, America. Thank you, Becky.
All right. Good night, America.
We'll see you.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.